Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the first part thereof for the 28th of December 2025. An awful lot of stuff to go through. You know, I keep telling you there's so much footage coming out every day. Well, times that by about 3 today, there is just an inordinate amount of footage coming out. And it reminds me of way back early in the war when we started seeing everyone publish FPV drone footage and all sorts when the Russians were attacking with all sorts of different columns of vehicles. That started happening again. Well, not so much the attacking with columns of vehicles. Well, actually, there are. Well, I mean, the types of vehicles are different, right? So you've got motorbikes and unarmored vehicles and all sorts. But the Russians are pretty active in a lot of places, and the Ukrainians do seem to be doing a fairly good job of attriting them. So what are we going to talk about mainly? Well, a lot of these videos, I think indicating, and Andrew Perpetua's got an anecdote and a few others, that the Russians are losing tremendous amounts of personnel. It just appears to be the case that December has been a very, very difficult month for the Russians, and their losses are huge. It's got randomly lots of horses and maybe even a camel being used in the combat zone. We have some news of the strikes in Berdiansk on the Spetsnaz by Magyar's birds or FP1s, FP2 drones, taking out huge numbers of people there. Some numbers that Magyar has added in there. We've got another primary strike on Crimea, taking out a lot of equipment, so on and so forth. And talk about the strikes from yesterday where the Russians hit Ukraine's energy infrastructure hugely. So lots to talk about. Let's get into it with the Ukrainian General Staff figures. But before we go there, of course, I remind you, if you can possibly subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, that'd be super generous. And keep yourselves in the mix as to what's going on. Right, let's get to it. So we have, no, we don't, because it's not on the screen. That's my stupidity there. We have the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find those caveats linked in the description below. 1,200 personnel, very high number there, and that accords with 166 vehicles and fuel tanks. This has been a pretty crazy 24 hours, it seems, for the Russians, losing an awful lot of troops and attacking, no doubt, with predominantly unarmored vehicles. But there are 5 tanks lost and 8 armored combat vehicles. That's fairly high, given that some days we can have 0. Last few days have been pretty high, and I think the Russians are quite active, particularly around Pokrovsk, north of Pokrovsk, obviously Play as well, but also a lot of losses north of the border into the Kursk area, into Tekkino as well. Wow. So we'll look at them in a second. 15 artillery pieces, below where we have seen it, but still pretty significant. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, that's a good haul, and very high numbers of drones as a result of the huge missile and drone strike from 2 nights ago, not from last night. Very low numbers last night, actually. And, of course, during the daytime where there's a lot of activity. Right, personnel front. Andrew Perpetua, who looks at more videos than you can poke a hairy stick at, I've asked him to come on and do a live with me talking about the front lines and kind of summarize the year. He said, I'm literally too busy. I'm sorry, I don't have the time. And that's because he's looking at all these videos on a daily basis. He counted 369, which has to be a massive record. I mean, goodness me, when it was getting over 100 a day of people that he was seeing in the videos taking out, then that was significant. Yesterday's haul was 369. These are human beings that Andrew Perpetua is seeing being killed. These are the ones that he says, right, I've got a video. This isn't duplicated. Just like equipment losses, personnel losses. Now, if that's somewhere like 3 times higher than he's used to, that is a huge haul. And I keep telling you that I'm seeing more and more videos of FPV drones taking out individual people. It's just, you know, I think with the prevalence of drones on a front line, like huge numbers of them, both sides have them. But I think the Ukrainians are using fewer people. The Russians are using more people. So they are going to be more susceptible to drones taking out individual humans. So at least in the videos we've seen, he says that's how many Russians bit the dust yesterday. Incredible. So, and someone says, is that a spike due to the Lazar video release? So there's a big montage evidently from Lazar. And Andrew says, actually, Lazar don't kill people, they kill vehicles. So it is just pretty incredible. Now, there are going to be some other anecdotes that I'm going to throw into that to sort of, I think, seek to confirm what he's saying. There are huge losses in terms of personnel. Tambov in Russia, this is one of them, is planning to build a crematorium due to a sharp increase in the number of burials. In September, local authorities stated the city cemetery resources were almost exhausted. Okay, that's just an anecdote. This is back in Russia, but they are struggling to be able to bury the number of people that they can. I was reading some anecdote of the amount of body bags and full of bodies that were being piled up somewhere, and the Russians were talking about these are the fresh ones, these are the older ones, and they're just huge numbers of dead. And of course, many of the dead are left out there in the fields and whatnot. Now, this is a video I showed you yesterday where you had FP2 probably drones striking in Crimea, particularly around Berdyansk, where they were hitting, it appears, and a number of times there were 3 drones that hit the same sort of building. I think the one that you can see there in the middle of the screen. And you're thinking, why concentrate on that place? It must have been high value. And all of these houses around here seem to be fair game. I don't know, they're like randomly hitting houses, or all of these are specific. There's another one hitting that large burning building, and then another one flying into it. So they evidently really wanted to hit that building. Then we hear today from Magyar himself that over 120 special forces were killed or wounded in that strike. He claims 51 were dead, 74 are injured, and the rest, I don't know how many with the total, are still missing. And that is coming from Magyar himself. Now, that is going to affect the daily personnel losses. I don't know how they confirm this. I don't know how Magyar confirms this. You would surely assume that there is intelligence coming from people in the area saying, oh my goodness, you know, we've lost this many, or they've intercepted calls or whatever, because you're never going to be able to tell from this kind of footage that you've got 51 dead, 74 injured. That is far too specific. So there's almost certainly coming from intercepted intelligence or signals intelligence or whatever. But that is an incredibly successful strike, given that these are Spetsnaz, these are special forces, 51 dead, 74 injured, and the rest are still missing. Wow, absolutely phenomenal, and a really, really a good success there for Magyar. Now, Russians' current goals are the full control of Donetsk region, maximum advance in Dnipropetrovsk region, and continued operations in Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, according to Budanov. I mentioned this previously, but I think it's worth mentioning again. It's this idea that the Russians are feeling they need to take as much land as possible just in case they are forced into a negotiation finally, whereby a line across the present contact line is drawn along that contact line. And so if that does happen, then the Russians are desperately trying to get as much territorial gain as possible. And that could be why you're seeing the Russians just throwing everything at the Ukrainians at the moment. They are really pushing hard in conditions that are going to be pretty challenging. There's a lot of snow going on. Perhaps they feel they can be protected by the snow, not so much drone activity. However, my goodness, there's all sorts of footage coming out. So defense forces control the northern part of Pokrovsk is a claim from the 7th Corps. Pokrovsk, the enemy attempts to break through the defense north of the railway line are unsuccessful. Russian attacks on the western outskirts with the aim of reaching the Hryshino area are blocked. And in Myrnarad, the situation remains difficult. The city's defense is held. Pause that there. The city's defense is held by units of the airborne forces and Marines. The defense forces are strengthening groups to contain pressure from the northeastern and southern directions. This ensures control over the corridor in the Svitli and Rivne areas. Enemy actions on the outskirts of Myrnarad, the enemy is resorting to demonstrative propaganda actions aimed primarily at the domestic audience of the Russian Federation. We're going to return to that concerning particularly Myrnarad. Now, what I wanted to do, I'm pausing this here. I always want to try and at least not just show you stuff getting blown up and people getting killed, you know, because of kind of some weird war porn desires, but actually, you know, they need to be functional for me to show them to you. So here's a video that's included here. And I just think there's something about this that signifies that Ukraine has replaced troops with drones. Like, this is a job that 10 years ago a soldier would be doing. We've got a building that we know the enemy's in. We need to clear it out. So we're going to go in, maybe throw some grenades around a corner, duck down by the side, then go in and systematically clear the building out. Well, now, like, and that's too intensive, labor intensive. It's too risky for troops that you have so few of. So this is it's almost like you've got a GoPro on someone's helmet here, and this is a human going in, almost like a computer game. Almost you're like going around a corner, and you can see the feet of a soldier there. But anyway, the drone is doing the job of the soldier there, going in and blowing up in the doorway and taking out the Russian soldier that was hiding there. Just there is that you know drones are definitely seeking in many different ways to replace humans in this war. The Ukrainians aren't lining their tree lines up with humans dug in anymore. They are using these drone corridors. And anyway, back to the propaganda claims. Ukraine's general staff debunks Kremlin claims of capturing Hrypole and Myrnohrad. Her fighting continues in both. Claims about controlling half of Konstantinivka are also false. Similar lies are were spread about Kupiansk and Pokrovsk. So there is an interesting point here that actually they made claims about Pokrovsk, the Russians, and Kupiansk. We know those are demonstrably false, and they're still trying to make false claims about Kupiansk. It is under Ukrainian control by and large now. The Russians lied. They are now making claims about Myrnohrad, Konstantinivka, and Hrypole, and the likelihood is they are lying there, or at least the general staff are claiming that the Russians are lying. So anyway, this is the video that you just saw is Ukraine's 7th Air Assault Corps still holding north of Pokrovsk and blocking Russian attempts to advance towards Frashina. Heavy fighting also continues in Myrnohrad. So that video goes some way to evidencing those claims, with the Russians being taken out in those places. Ukraine, though, has had some challenges, particularly in Siversk. They're having challenges right across the front line, right? But Siversk has been a real disaster, and 2 brigade commanders have now been fired. That's Colonels Alexei Konoval from the 54th Brigade and Vladimir Poteshkin from the 10th Brigade, dismissed for false reporting. They claimed positions were manned when troops had abandoned them weeks earlier. This is a real issue for the Russian army. We have heard it time and again. More infrequently, we've heard about this from the Ukrainian army, but it is an issue. And Sirsky talked about this a couple of months back, where he said, I'm not accepting people lying about successes or situations on the front line. And here we have seen him now hold true to his word, firing commanders, and there are people calling for these commanders to be thrown onto the front line, that kind of stuff, as you would expect. But it doesn't help. Garbage in, garbage out. You make poor decisions if you don't have the correct information, and that does not help Sirsky, for example, make decent decisions about Siversk. The BS goes up the line of chain of command, and then you're like, "What? This is all the information I got. I'm making the overall decisions. We are going to not, defend Siversk here because we need to put those troops into Pokrovsk. We've got these pockets of resistance near Siversk, so that should be fine." Turns out you don't, because you've been lied to, and then that looks Sirsky look bad. When actually it comes down to commanders on the front line who are making these BS claims. A former Wagner soldier has told in a video how his unit killed 7 Ukrainian children during an assault on a school in the village of Bakhmutska. Goodness me, you remember the Bakhmutska? That's near Bakhmut on the Bakhmutivka River, or is it Bakhmutska River? In the Donetsk region. The occupiers took the bodies and buried them in the Wagner cemetery. He also says the commander of the 37th Motorized Rifle Regiment ordered his men to be killed and then listed as missing after the assaults. Goodness me, that sounds horrific. I don't know what that would have been for. But yeah, admitting that their unit killed 7 children. Absolutely horrific. Testimony of an Indian prisoner of war here about recruitment in Russia. He says he's been sent into war after working for a couple of days and decided to surrender into Ukrainian captivity in order to stay safe. So there's a full video. He said, "Why did I come to Russia? To do a drug delivery. It's like a normal delivery." So interesting as to why he's in Russia. 2 days I worked, and third day they give me the coordinates. And I see a Ukrainian dugout. Oh no, so sorry. That isn't why he came to Russia, to do a drug delivery. Yeah, it's a bit confusing because he's like that's talking about giving the coordinates and then seeing a Ukrainian dugout. So I don't know, a bit of confusion there. But anyway, I keep talking about how worried I am that Russia is able to generate quite a few mobilized troops from around the world. This is a story in the New York Times about a Ukrainian combat medic, Sergeant Serhiy Tishchenko, who spent 472 days on his position. It is over a year. I didn't expect it to last this long, he said. Long rotations have become one of the key problems for Ukraine due to shortage of personnel. Serhiy is a combat medic. His first rotation lasted about 45 days, two lots of 30 days each. And then in July 2024, he was transferred to the 30th Mechanized Brigade and then sent to a new position in Donetsk. The position was regularly attacked. Some of the soldiers were killed. Hope appeared in the autumn when they reported on the radio that preparations for evacuation were being prepared. However, due to weather conditions, it was postponed several times. About 20 days later, the attempt was repeated. Two soldiers crawled out of the bunker into a trench littered with garbage and the remains of Russian soldiers. Sergeant Tishchenko was awarded the title of Hero of Ukraine. So it's a somewhat truncated story summary there from Max 25. I presume he was one of the ones that crawled out into that trench. But anyway, 472 days is an outrageous time to be spending in position on the front line. Now, I've already shown you multiple videos of horses and donkeys being used over the course of the war, but actually quite a lot recently. Here is a video that was doing the rounds yesterday of a car passing 3 Russian soldiers on horseback, just going through some settlement that's been pretty much shellacked. More footage of Russian cavalry, says War Translated. Occupiers now rely on horses and donkeys for assaults and logistics. Well, then we saw this video as well yesterday that was very much going viral because a Russian soldier had put armor onto a donkey and then a helmet on its head. It looks like that's garroting its neck quite uncomfortably. But anyway, another combat donkey joins the Russian army, now upgraded with a helmet and body armor there. So again, just quite incredible. This is what you're seeing on the front line. These aren't AI generated, one presumes, and you never can tell these days. And then the latest one, although there's no evidence for sure that this is in the combat zone, but that is combat camouflage netting to the right there by the looks of it. There's a camel. Russians released new footage showing a camel possibly in a combat zone. So we've got horses, donkeys, and camels being utilized by the Russians. It's absolutely incredible. It really, really is. Yeah. So here we have a video of, and this is a fascinating video. So I'll let it play out, turn the sound off because I assume it's got Benny Hill footage on it. So you've got 3 UAZs charging across an open snowy field. The lead and rear vehicles were knocked out, forcing survivors into one car. That didn't last either. Remaining attackers were eliminated by FPVs. Now, I thought these can't be FPVs. I initially thought these are mortars or artillery, but no, I think they are genuinely FPVs because their accuracy is obscene. But because the ground is white, it really shows up the FPV explosions as they hit the ground, and the explosives throw out a kind of black cloud onto the ground of debris from the exploding drone. And it really gives you a sense of like what's going on here. So you have drones just hitting these people who are running away, all trying to get to the tree line there, and then they for some reason do a U-turn and turn back and go the other way, and these drones are just hitting them and hitting them and hitting them. And you can see how many drones are utilized here. There's got to be a good dozen drones after the end of this video that are essentially picking off each and every one of these survivors who get out of the vehicle. So you've got 3 vehicles attacking. The vehicles are completely knocked out. And then you've got possibly, it's hard to know though, possibly 2 survivors in total that make it to the tree line. But for some reason, they didn't go to there's another explosion in the tree line. And so who knows there? So possibly they didn't even make it. Well, I don't know. I don't know why they ran to that first tree line and then then turned around and went in the complete opposite direction, just opening themselves up to more drone attacks. And one of these videos, I don't know which one it is now. So here we have the Ukrainian border guards from the Steel Border Brigade hitting 4 shelters, a vehicle, an ammo depot, and a launch site in Russia's Kursk region, used to attack into Sumy. So the Ukrainians going into Kursk to continue their operations, I think, is significant. We have here Russians attempting to breach a border in Sumy region in the Tetkino area. So that's to the top left, really, of the active area. This is where the Ukrainians have taken some land to the west of the same river inside Russian territory. Russians can't really take that back because of the river there. But yeah, the Ukrainians working inside Tetkino area, the Wings of Hell unit of the 103rd, taking out 2 cars, a buggy, an ATV, and 9 occupiers and more. There was one video, maybe it was, oh no, it was this one. We'll get there in a second then. There's just so many videos. Ukrainian heavy attack bombers and FPV drones destroy Russian mechanized column in the Dobropilya direction. So this is, I was reporting on this yesterday. It appears that I think this is more footage that's coming out of the attack on Dobropilya, and this is the Lazar group, who they're very well regarded drone group, but as Andrew says, they spend a lot of time taking out vehicles. Combat footage of the work of the 27th Pokrovsk Brigade of the National Guard, Lazar's group, in cooperation with colleagues from adjacent units there. So that Dobropilya attack, I think, was quite a major one. It's on Andrew Perpetua's map. You can check that out. There's a lot of equipment, I think, lost there. In fact, if we go to his map, it is, I haven't done a mapping tape for ages, and for that I apologize. But we have a look at his map. You can see when he geolocates particular, it's Konstantinivka. So this is Myrnahrad. So we're going up here. If we go back a day or so, you should see, yeah. So this will be the attack up here, where you've got Russian AFV damage, AFV destroyed, abandoned, damaged, abandoned, damaged, AFV destroyed. So this is the road that they were coming up, and they're just absolutely hammered on the way up there, losing quite a lot of equipment, and then a lot of equipment up here as well, going into Volodymyrivka. In fact, this Volodymyrivka I've got discussed elsewhere. I think that's Tetkino. Where were we? That's Dobropilya. Yeah, this is Volodymyrivka. So this next video is of this attack coming up this road, and again being repelled. Now, why I've included this video? So here it says 1 NTLB destroyed. So that's an APC, an ATV, so a quad, an NTLB damaged, and then 7 infantrymen eliminated. Now, this is, I mean, take the human aspect away from this, and psychology and morality, and this is war. What I thought was interesting to note here is, I'm going to turn the sound off for me, is that you can see the number of drones they concentrate on taking individuals out. So we have a drone hitting a human there, who a soldier who actually seems to be somewhat unaffected, and then he's hit another time, or not quite hit, is just by him, but he's evidently not in a good way. So there have been 2 near misses. He then sits down and like, I'm done for. And then it appears that they go for him again with a 3rd drone as he's lying down and pretty much done for. Now, as horrible as that is, purely from like a resources point of view, I find it interesting that that's 3 drones on 1 human here. And they make sure in the end. But yeah, I quite often see multiple drones used on individual humans, and it shows you probably how many drones the Ukrainians have access to. That there's probably no great shortage of drones, FPV drones, to utilize on the front line. But that's just my speculation there. Always trying to wonder who has more drones to use. Near Pokrovsk, combat engineers restore anti-drone net tunnels every day, shielding supply routes, medical evacuation, troop rotations under constant FPV drone threat. The enemy keeps striking these lifelines, nets are torn apart, supports collapse, but repairs are carried out under protection, right? And it's the 7th Corps that's doing that. So that I don't know how close they get to the front lines in order to do this, but you can imagine these roads and these roads here are going to be roads that they are continually trying to protect. Lots of fighting over Berdiansk and Razin, this kind of area. Yeah, it's pretty hardcore around this whole front, as you can imagine. But anyway, yeah, those drone nets are a lifeline to many who are fighting in the area. This then allows supplies to get in successfully more often than not, hopefully. So anyway, interesting video to watch, a couple of minutes of him explaining stuff there, so you can go and watch out. All of these videos are linked in the description below. If I can't fit them in the description, I put them pinned in the first comment on the video. Here we have the first Russian turtle tank bridge layer was stopped before it reached the water. Its crew abandoned it a few hundred meters from the Kazany Turets River. But that's how Russian improvisation works. The welded together assault vehicles that now dominate the front didn't work either until they did. You can, at the beginning of when we saw all of these crazy vehicles put together, these Mad Max vehicles, you're thinking, oh, it's ridiculous. And then actually they keep doing it. Oh, why do they keep doing it? Because there is functional benefit for doing so. And actually, those porcupine tanks, those turtle tanks, take 15 to 25 drones to immobilize them. Then they are exhausting the Ukrainian resources. The Kazany Turets is blocking 150,000 Russian troops from advancing in Kramatorsk. 27 vehicles have drowned trying to ford it. Purpose-built bridge layers keep getting destroyed by drones. Russia's answer: weld a bridge span onto a turtle tank. The first one failed. The next one might not. And this is what they do. They keep plugging away until they can overcome the Ukrainian drone defense, that drone corridor. And then they finally get it there. And then, they swarm the area. They don't have any regard for the lives of their own fighters. Now, I talked to you about how Denis Kapustin, who's a little bit controversial, is a far-right extremist who is a kind of a nationalist, but understands that Russia have got it all wrong and has been fighting for the Ukrainians with the Russian Volunteer Corps. They were initially fighting up north into Russia, attacking into Russia. Now they've been utilized on the southern front line. I don't know if that shows you that the Ukrainians are desperate, that they're bringing the Russian Volunteer Corps to help plug gaps on the southern front line. It's probably a bad sign. But he vowed, just a little bit more information here on him in Euromaidan Press, they say he vowed to atone for Russia's sins with his life. So he literally said that a couple of weeks ago. And then 2 weeks later, a drone killed him. Denis Kapustin founded the Russian Volunteer Corps, 1,000 Russians fighting Putin under Ukraine's military intelligence. Controversial figure. He was also a neo-Nazi, Moscow-born, and fighting for Kyiv. In 2023, he led the first raids into Russian territory and promised Belgorod, Bryansk, Kursk, Moscow, wait for us. Russia sentenced him to life twice. He was 41. I don't know if Ukrainians believed his vow, a Ukrainian commander wrote, but Denis said it, and Denis did it. He gave his life for fighting for Ukraine. He might not be the most morally attractive of humans, but you can't doubt his dedication to the cause, and he chose the right cause. There's some moral complexity there for sure. Somebody says he already has a successor. Okay, then last bit for this section. There's a lot going on, isn't there? Freight train derails near Kyzyterinka station in the Rostov region. A total of 25 trains are delayed for up to 4 hours on the Bataysk Rostov railway section. This is apparently causing quite an issue. There's quite a few people talking about this, and that includes access to Crimea as well being affected. So I don't know if that's sabotage or just poor maintenance. Now, last night, much quieter night for drones, no missiles, only 48 drones going into Ukraine, aimed at largely at the frontline areas. That makes them much more difficult to shoot down, and so the interception rate is actually lower, but it's not as bad when there are fewer drones sent. So 30 were intercepted, 18 got through at 9 locations. That's a 62% interception rate. Not great interception, but far fewer, so not too bad. Okay, we have a bit of footage of an F-16 fighter jet intercepting a Shahed with an American AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missile. This is a more expensive way of taking out Shaheds. This is, in my opinion, suboptimal, but it's quite impressive to see. But you'd rather not have F-16s have to take out Shaheds. You'd rather intercepted drones are much cheaper. Here, the Alpha SBU or SPU operators shot down another 14 Shahed drones, intercepted them with these interceptor drones. What I would like to know is presently, even more updated from say 2 weeks ago, a month ago, I would like to know what percentage of Shahed drones that are taken out with interceptor drones, and also how many interceptor drones, what's their success rate? We'd heard previously 2 for every Shahed drone. So, 50% success rate, but these are cheap and cheerful compared to the Shaheds themselves and compared to an AIM-9 Sidewinder, right? Anyway, that's good news. Now, an impressive bit of footage here, and it makes me think, well, maybe they should just put up wires all over the shop. Here we see a Shahed drone get taken out by electric wires, and I'm wondering whether it clips the first wire and then hits another wire that maybe causes it to explode with the electrical charge going through. But anyway, that's a good way of taking out a Shahed drone. That was in Kyiv yesterday morning. Now, local public report footage showing the aftermath of strikes on a hydroelectric power plant in Vyshhorod in the Kyiv region. So the Russians absolutely hammered Ukraine's energy infrastructure 2 nights ago, and it was bad. It was bad. And this kind of stuff, this will take some serious resources and effort to fix. It's not so much about blowing up the dam, but it's all the other infrastructure concerned with power generation. And so much of it is knackered here by the looks of it. And I don't know how long that will take to fix, but they have been working furiously. Let's just look at a more energy infrastructure damage. This is Russian media showing the aftermath of Kyiv combined heat and power plant 5 following the combined missile and drone strike 2 nights ago. Kyiv is enduring an already 17-hour and still ongoing strike, said no reports yesterday, and missile attack as Russia continues its sustained assault on the capital and energy infrastructure. This is one of my massive concerns for Ukraine. This is totally unsustainable for Ukraine. They can't have a defense industry that's operational if they don't have power. You can't have heat and power for your citizens, for commerce, for industry, for services. Nothing works if you have no power. This is a real concern for the Ukrainians, and that's a significant strike on that power plant, CHPP 5. We hear from Naftogaz, Naftogaz, that facilities were hit 2 nights ago. Both gas power stations and gas production enterprises have been severely damaged. I reported last night, said Tim White, that at least 4 of Kyiv's power stations were under attack. And after the missiles, some drones continued to attack. So gas infrastructure was also hit. And we heard at one point the last night that power restoration timelines in Kyiv remain unknown. But according to DTEC, around 500,000 households were currently without power. Electricity as emergency outages remain in effect across the city. That was at some point last night. So that was about what we've got there, almost 4. That was about 6 o'clock yesterday evening, still 500,000 without power. At the beginning of the day, though, there was a third, I think, of the Kyiv region without power. Indeed, it turns out the latest count is 748,000 families have had their power back. So that's going to be households. So it'd be more people have had power returned to them. Meanwhile, emergency power outages continue to be implemented on the left bank. That's particularly worse for the Ukrainians on the left bank of the Dnipro River in Kyiv. Now, going on to what Ukraine achieved last night, Russia claims it allegedly that it shot down 151 drones overnight across 15 regions, 24 over Moscow alone. Over 270 flights were delayed and 42 were cancelled at Moscow's airports. This was one of the drone bomber maps that came out yesterday. So you can see quite a lot was going towards the kind of Moscow area, a few are down in occupied territories. Crimea was also targeted, I think, but with those medium range drones. So claims last night, the AFE, the Ukraine has hit Syzran oil refinery. The annual processing volume of that enterprise is from 7 to 8.9 million tons of oil. Lukoil Volgograd Neft Perobotka oil products processing plant. The oil products pipeline and the oil production technological unit were damaged there. We have a storage and maintenance site for unmanned boats in the Chornomorsk area of Crimea. We're going to see the video of this later. A repair unit for the 1435th Motorized Rifle Regiment near Anthracite in Luhansk region, a pontoon ferry near Nikonorivka, and a storage facility for Shahed drones in Makivka, Donetsk region. So hopefully, those Shahed drones won't be able to find their way to Ukrainian targets. Now, occupied Donetsk was under attack last night quite a bit. And like I mentioned, you can see that from this part of the map there. So what do we have? Multiple explosions are being reported across the city of Donetsk as strikes continued there. Fire was reported at a tobacco factory in Donetsk. An electrical substation is located in the same area. So that could have been the target there. In a refinery at Syzran, Samara region in Russia, that was under attack. There were air alerts across the city, and actually you can see large explosions going off in the distance there. There is some footage of fires being recorded near the Smolensk oil refinery, which is the one at Syzran. And here we go. The Lugansk Neftgaz Syzran oil refinery came under a Ukrainian drone attack overnight. Locals reported explosions and a fire is visible. Drones possibly hit the ELOU AVT-5 installation there. And we hear, this is a video coming out from the General Staff this morning. Unmanned Systems Forces hit Syzran oil refinery, located more than 700 kilometers from Ukraine. Its processing volumes amount to 8.5 million tons of oil per year. That's about 3% of the Russian volume, which is significant. It produces gasoline, diesel, aviation kerosene, fuel oil, and bitumen. So that was targeted and hopefully was badly affected. So yeah, more videos there. Deep processing and all sorts. So lots of videos of Syzran getting targeted. You can go and look at those at your own leisure. Okay, then we come on to this. I think it says elsewhere it called this a primary video, but it's not a primary video. Like they have different sort of logos and starts, and you can see that. Anyway, possibly this report as being a Magyar video as well, and I'm never quite sure like how much this is a separate unmanned systems center, so it is the USF, but sometimes you hear about certain units, you're like, okay, this unit's done that, and then it's reported by Magyar, and you're like, okay, so he is responsible for that unit. So I'm unsure as to what units fall under the USF umbrella, but nonetheless, this appears to be one of them. Overnight drones in the Ukraine's first separate unmanned systems center struck multiple military targets in occupied Crimea. Hits were reported on Valdai radar, a radar reconnaissance command post, and a storage and launch base for Russian uncrewed surface vessels in Chornomorsk. So not your UAVs, but USVs was apparently targeted. So let's have a look at the video here. Just trying to make sure, want to make sure it wasn't the same one that we saw the night before, though, or clips from the one from the night before. Who knows? No, I don't think it was. So this does look separate, and yeah, quite bouncing along quite a bit. And I wonder how much that affects their accuracy, but it might be sped up. I don't know. So you've got some kind of, this is certainly a radar facility. You've got two domes, and I'm amazed at how many domes there are still in Crimea. I would have thought that there wouldn't be any of these left, but here you go. Anyway, that is targeted twice by a drone, and then you got another dome just by that. So quite a bit of activity taking place there. Right, now we're going to move on to other bits and pieces, and I've been speaking for quite a long time. Now, this one's close to my heart. I've got multiple sclerosis. I've got progressive multiple sclerosis. I've got it into a sort of a stasis. My walking is getting worse, though. I had stem cell set therapy in Russia, of all places, in Moscow in 2019. It was the best place to have it in the world. Now they do it in the UK, annoyingly, but I don't know that I'd qualify. Anyway, so I've got MS. So this kind of speaks to me. She's almost certainly got relapsing remitting MS. Anyway, you can go and look up the different types. Russia subjects a Ukrainian political prisoner with multiple sclerosis to medical torture for serving her country. So she served with the IDAR battalion and then joined the as I think a combat medic, and then joined the main armed forces of Ukraine, and then came out because she got MS. And then she was living in, I think, Vinnytsia, as according to this article, and then she went to live in Luhansk with her family because she needed looking after. She got married, and she required being looked after, 24 hours a day type thing for different, here it says MS is a brutal autoimmune disease, and one that at present has no cure. There is, however, treatment which can slow down the development of the worst symptoms, and it is this that Russia has deprived her of because of its vengeful reprisals against all of those who seek to defend and to serve Ukraine. So she's been captured now and taken as a political prisoner and being given this huge, crazy sentence, as is their want at the moment, for having served for what they see as a terrorist organization. Pavlo told Grati that she is a fighter and says that during periods when she was feeling better, she would even think about looking for work. There were, however, other times when she would lose consciousness and her limbs would go numb, meaning she needed 24-hour assistance. So that sounds very much like relapsing remitting, where you get bad periods where you can lose your sight, you can lose your ability to walk or whatever, and then it goes into remission, then you get relapse, and you take drugs to try and extend the period between your relapses. But sometimes with certain types of relapsing, when you get better after your relapse into remission, you get to a point that was worse than it was before. So it's like still a graded up and down, getting worse. I've got primary progressive, so I never went through the up and down. I just got MS, and my trajectory is going to be worse until I was in a bed, unable to move, and died. Right, that's my trajectory. So I was like, right, there's no drugs for that in the UK at the moment, and there's no treatment for it. There is one drug now, but when I was diagnosed in 2019, I was like, I've got to do all the research, see what I can do. Researched stem cell therapy, got stem cell therapy, and the best place was in Moscow. Really good hospital, amazing team of people. So I had that done in Moscow, and it's kept it on the straight and narrow to a degree. But I'd never be able to go back to Moscow now because I spent 4 years slagging them off. But anyway, so she's now being captured by Russians, and it seems that they are unfortunately not giving her the treatment that she needs, and she's being denied disease modifying treatment. So that sucks. And with certain types of MS as well, I'm really lucky. There's so many different types of, so many manifestations of MS because it affects your central nervous system, and that does everything in your body, really. So some people have loads of pain. I don't have pain. I've never had pain with my MS, which is really, really lucky, but lots of people have pain. So that can be a really painful experience for her if she has those symptoms as well. But anyway, just I thought I'd throw that in there as a story of someone who is being, I think, medically tortured by the Russians. It's just appalling. Absolutely appalling. Right. Okay. Now moving on. So we're going to go to the Russian economy again. Richard Vereka says of Evgen Istrubin's numbers that I talked about these numbers previously. Someone else actually, wasn't Istrubin, but anyway, a couple of days back, that all the numbers for Russia are looking bad economically. In November, Russia experienced a massive industrial collapse. Pumps minus 38%, bearings minus 37%. All of these are negative numbers. Tractors 61%, bulldozers 53%, elevators 37%, internal combustion engines 48%, cars 34%. Buses 17 to 28, trucks 43, car bodies 38, trailers 33, electric locomotives 24, railway cars 40 to 44%. And then chemical industry, all of these down. Construction section, all of these down. Like, all of those numbers are negative. It is just looking bad all round. Richard Vereka says, look, if these numbers are accurate, which I assume they are, then the Russian economy is collapsing. Collapsing is an overused word, but most categories have double-digit digest drops, some much more than that. Tractor production down over 60%. There are a couple of exceptions. Plate glass, surely plate glass, is up 2.3%. All I can think of is maybe this is to replace all the windows that people keep falling out of. The other is pleaser and sports vessels, up 15%. This seems a very strange growth industry in a war, but I'm guessing that now corrupt generals can no longer buy their luxury yachts from Europe. They are making them at home. So anyway, it's all looking very bad, and there are various facts and figures. Well, one assumes these are facts. Certainly lots of figures here indicating that it is not looking good in the Russian economy, and right across every sector they're in trouble. Now there's a few more points on this. Don't know, Twitter not rendering very well. Russian industry, says Kirilo Shevchenko, is in deep trouble. Top executives say 2025 sales are the worst since 1998, worse than 2009 crisis, and 2015 sanctions military boom is over. Defense takes all the resources while the civilian economy shrinks fast. Car production fell 34%, tractors crashed 62%, and even food production is declining for the first time in 15 years, per the Moscow Times. Sanctions keep biting hard. In 2026, growth is expected at just 0.5 to 1.5%. Civilian sectors will struggle more, with the risks of banking crisis, high rates over 20%, and squeezed oil revenues. The war machines keep running, but at mounting cost to the rest of the economy. And it's really interesting looking as watching a TLDR news piece on the Russian economy saying, you've got to, as in economics, always, you look at one metric, you say that's good, that's really good, that metric, but that metric can have negative effects over there. So a really strong ruble, for example, affects exports. And actually the fact that the ruble is really strong, which might be because the dollar is quite weak, the dollar's been in a bit of trouble. So the ruble's very strong comparatively, but that means that their exports of hydrocarbons become more expensive, and they're already in trouble with that. So, there are loads of economic indicators that I think showing that Russia is struggling, and the Kremlin is then extended the diesel and gasoline export bans. So the refined products, again, they introduced in July of this year. They've been extended for a third time to the end of February 2026. The only reason you would extend that is because you are so desperate to use it back at home, because you aren't producing enough, and you aren't producing enough because these refineries are getting blown up. Another one last night. And that is going to have a real effect on your ability to export. You're not producing enough to export. So if you're not exporting gasoline and diesel one iota, not a single bit, then as that mentions, as Maria Drutska here says, that's 7 months then of lost revenue. 7 months of lost revenue. And what TLDR was saying, that was it the amount of oil they are selling at the moment is half of what it was. That is a huge impact on your cash cow. Russian long-term restrictions on mobile internet are expanding to occupied Ukraine, says Drutska. Restrictions in Crimea will be in place until the end of the war, quote, with security being used as the excuse. So they're restricting people's mobile internet usage. And I think she's got a good point at the end here. They are likely afraid of coordinated protests as the economic collapse gets worse. So we know the economy's in trouble. Yeah, it's definitely happening. And at the same time, they're tightening internet usage. They're stopping people using WhatsApp and all these social media apps. The only one you can use is Max, which is the centralized Russian one that comes preloaded on new phones. The real reason they're doing that is because messaging apps are what people use in order to coalesce, in order to meet and protest. When you protest, it's messaging apps that get used. I think, the Euromaidan protests were really big on that and all sorts. So by really, by having an iron grip on tech in Russia, they are proactively working to stop Russians from protesting. That is, honestly, I think that's really, really important there. Now, 73% of Ukrainians support Ukraine's accession to the EU, and almost 60% support accession to NATO, the Centre for Social and Marketing Research, SOKIS, says. The number of supporters of accession to EU has not changed, with the number of people that support accession to NATO has decreased, probably because They realize that the US don't want them there, nor does Hungary, etc., etc. The White House believes that in the last 2 weeks, more progress has been made on peace in Ukraine than in the entire of last year. An official from the Trump administration said about this, we've gone as far as possible with the Russians and Ukrainians. In the last 2 weeks, we've made more progress than in the last year. We want to put the ball in the net. We're moving in the right direction. The meeting of the presidents of Ukraine and the US at Mar-a-Lago on Sunday, and that's been moved forward 2 hours today, by the way, is a sign of significant progress in peace negotiations. Trump previously stated that he would meet with Zelensky only when he believes that an agreement is close to being reached. And then we have a statement from Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, saying over the last 2 days in Florida, the Russian special envoy Kirill Dmitriev, this is going back a few days, to the 21st, actually, held productive and constructive meetings with the American delegation to advance President Trump's peace plan on Ukraine. The American delegation included Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and the White House staff member Josh Grunbaum. Russia remains fully committed to achieving peace in Ukraine. Russia highly values the efforts and support of the United States to resolve the Ukrainian conflict and re-establish global security. Steve Witkoff releases a message where he talks about himself in the third person, and then the third paragraph is waxing lyrical about Russia. Russia remains fully committed to achieving peace in Ukraine. Russia highly values the efforts and support of the United States to resolve the Ukrainian conflict. He didn't write this. That's literally like Kirill Dmitriev has written this for Steve Witkoff. As Timothy Snyder says, the third paragraph reads as if the Russians wrote it. Maybe they did. In any event, it's an atrociously big lie, 1984 grade, as Aaron Rupar rightfully says. War is peace. Russia's fully committed to peace in Ukraine. Absolute freaking nonsense. And that's what Steve Witkoff is saying. So unfortunately, Steve Witkoff is batting for the wrong side there. I'm sorry, he is. In diplomatic speak. Reuters reports that one of the most controversial points of the peace plan is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Even if control is restored, Ukraine will need 2 to 3 years to assess its condition and about 3 more years to restore it to fully launch it again. Enerhoatom states that the real condition of the plant is currently unknown. According to analysts, the generation deficit in Ukraine is around 4 gigawatts, which corresponds to the capacity of 4 Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants. They need 4 of these just to get back to the energy they need. Zelensky and European leaders discussed key documents of the peace plan before meeting with Trump. So he's been on a blower to Europeans. And we discussed 20 points, our attitude to the territorial issue, to Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, to issues with money. Now it's easier for us. As we said, 20 points are already 90% ready because there is a solution. Some may like it, some may not, but nevertheless, Ukraine will receive $100 billion today. So I presume they've got that money from the EU already. We really hope that there will be a constructive conversation with the US, and we really want to get together with the European leaders to spread all the developments that we have. But Reuters reports that talks in Florida between Zelensky and Trump will face major friction. Kyiv rejects demands to surrender Donbass or the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, while Russia keeps pushing its maximalist terms. So both of them have the red lines over the same points. Ukraine's 20-point plan is 90% ready, but territory remains the red line. And Trump could use that, Zelensky's recalcitrance there and he's justifiably not up for giving away his territory, but Trump could use that as a stick to beat Ukraine with. Now, Europe is set to finalize Ukraine's security guarantees in January. France and the UK are leading efforts with a coalition of the willing to define post-ceasefire support, including possible troop deployments. Emmanuel Macron says it's now up to Russia to respond. And then I'm finally going to leave you with this. I talked about how Howard Buffett is doing a really good job. He's raised an awful lot of money for the Howard Buffett Foundation. He's a billionaire philanthropist, but at least he's putting his money in the right place, as is George Soros. Both of these often seen as kind of liberal philanthropists. They are ones who have supported Ukraine massively. And people on the other side of the spectrum, like Elon Musk, simply haven't. You could argue about Starlinks, but then he's providing them to Russia effectively, or not stopping the Russians using them, at least not overtly. Anyway, Howard Buffett visited children celebrating the holiday in a bomb shelter in Kherson under their normal school. He visited patients in Kherson too, and actually. So when you look at how much this man's done, now he's a billionaire, so he's got more scope than maybe you and I, clearly. So I don't know what a percentage of his net wealth that he is assisting with, but from what I can work out, he has given more than many countries. He's committed approximately $1.45 billion in aid to Ukraine since the full-scale Russian invasion began in 2022 through the Howard Buffett Foundation. And it focuses on humanitarian assistance, food security, conflict mitigation, and is considered Ukraine's largest private donor. Key areas of support include, blah, blah, blah. So he is the largest private donor to Ukraine. Demining efforts, infrastructure and public safety, medical support, war crimes investigation, food security, and agriculture. Honestly, tremendous. Imagine if he had $1.45 billion worth of aid and all the infrastructure and all the security that's providing. Absolutely phenomenal. So, hats off to him. Good lad. Right. Thank you for your support. And by the way, I really do appreciate that. atpgeo.com/donate. We are doing really well with the Christmas tree trucks campaign for Car for Ukraine. We're at 7,500 out of 11,000 euros. That would help the 93rd Brigade, the Kolodny Yar, get themselves a truck that's been at least somewhat up armored. So please help out with that. atpgeo.com/donate. That's enough from me. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.